Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a conversation with the most watched host on public television, best-selling author and renowned travel expert and teacher, Rick Steves. My name is Tammy Gieselman. I serve in the areas of education and innovation within constituent relations and services at the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry. And we are live tonight to map out some time and space for a conversation with Rick about travel, though not so much about the best B&B in Tuscany, though Rick could certainly give us pointers, or why it's best to eat a late dinner in Heidelberg, but rather we'll be talking a little bit more about the spirituality of travel and how the spirituality of travel can intensify our connections with the rest of the world, and why traveling is a spiritual discipline. I would like to remind all of you watching live that we will be taking some questions throughout the conversation. So we're not waiting until the end. We're going to integrate your questions into this larger conversation. So feel free to post your questions in the comments section of either the Facebook or the YouTube live feeds. Also, if you registered for tonight's live event, you are eligible to receive one of 5 autographed copies of Rick's most recent book, For the Love of Europe. It's fantastic. I have one in my possession, and the images are incredible. So winners will be chosen at random, and we'll also announce the winners throughout the conversation. So you won't have to wait till the end of the show. So now I am thrilled to introduce everyone's favorite travel expert and teacher, Rick Steves.
Tammy, thank you very much. It's so nice to be with you. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Oh, welcome, Rick. We are thrilled you are here, and we anticipate learning a great deal tonight. And we're just excited to talk a little bit about another side of travel, spirituality and travel. So if you're ready, let's jump right in.
Let's go.
Let's do it. So, Rick, throughout my faith formation, even as a kid, even before confirmation classes, we were taught that the spiritual disciplines were things like prayer and fasting and corporate worship and study and fellowship, sharing the sacraments, giving away our money, tithes and offerings, that these were the practices or disciplines or acts, if you will, that help us grow closer to God and God's people. But you are claiming that travel is also a spiritual discipline or act, if you will, just like prayer and fasting and tithing. So say more about that, if you will.
Well, Tammy, just as you were talking there, I was thinking, why am I a Christian? Why am I a Lutheran Christian? Well, I mean, we're born into this. My parents are from Norway, so I'm that sort of flavor of Christianity. And you're raised as your parents raise you. And then when you hit teenage or college age, you sort of go, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to be dictated anything. I want to really make up my own mind. And I've spent 100 days a year in Europe ever since I graduated from high school. It's what I do. I'm in that rut. 40 years in a row now, more than that. I'm in Europe for three months. And I was just looking back at my old journals. I've got these journals that I lovingly wrote before I was a travel writer. And they're 200-page, hardbound, fine print. And I'm looking through those, and I was a backpacker, ragamuffin, vagabond that was exploring the world and exploring my relationship with God at the same time. And it just, I just thought of this now as you were talking. My travels when I was in those formative years was key. And when I travel, I'm generally alone, but I'm never alone because I've got a beautiful relationship with my Savior and with our Heavenly Father and so on. And the cool thing about traveling is you recognize vividly that we're all children of God on this planet. And when you travel, you get to know the family. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. I mean, what a witness and testimony. Um, so this is a quote that I used to have on my office wall, and maybe you know John Dominic Crossan. He's a New Testament scholar, and
Hmm.
he once said, "If prayer is supposed to allow God to get at us, then scholarship is when that happens for me." So when he's immersed in scholarship and academia, that is when he experiences God most vividly, as you say.
Hmm.
So, with Crossan's understanding, that kind of connection with God, I'm wondering, would it be true for you to say if spiritual disciplines are supposed to allow God to get at us, then travel is when that happens for me?
You know,
True or false?
I think travel is where I always say travel is, I say it's accelerated living. It's everything is more vivid. You make more friends, you have more eurekas, you get into more challenging positions. You reconsider truths you always thought were self-evident and God-given, and and when you travel, everything is just in more higher um, intensity. It's higher contrast, and for me, travel is a beautiful chance to appreciate our oneness as children of God, as I mentioned, and it's also a chance to appreciate nature, creation. When I'm on the road and I see somebody crying, when I'm on the road and I see a mother loving her daughter or her son, when I'm on the road and I'm on top of a mountain and I'm so close to heaven. I mean, Lutherans don't normally do this, but I can imagine doing this on top of the Alps. People ask me, "What's your favorite cathedral?" And I think it's on top of the Alps. When I'm walking on a ridge, and you're just immersed in the wonder of creation, and it is so vivid. And I'm thankful for that in so many ways. And just in the last few years, I've been developing this idea of the road as church, and I really find that for me, the road is church. And I'm really thankful I found my niche, and I am absolutely a tour guide. That's what I do. I mean, I just am so passionate about being a tour guide, helping people celebrate this world in all its diversity. And in a way, that's kind of a pastor in the rough for this notion that the road is church. And when people are fortunate enough or blessed enough to be able to get out and travel, I think it is an absolute heartbreak if they don't travel in a way that expands their love and their appreciation and is transformational. A lot of people travel in a way that just accentuates everything they have in their outlook. But for me, travel is humbling. Traveling is an adventure. Traveling, I always say, culture shock is a good thing. For me, it's the growing pains of a broader perspective. And that broader perspective can be interpreted or appreciated in a number of ways. But we crave, we strive for, that's our goal, is to come home with the most beautiful souvenir, and that's a broader perspective. And for a person who's interested in getting closer to God, traveling can be a very constructive activity.
Yeah, that's awesome, Rick. We are getting some really good questions from our audience. And so I'm going to go ahead and take one if you're up for that. This one is from Kurt, and Kurt is a seminarian. Kurt wants to know, what are some of your most spiritual spaces, natural and or human made, you've experienced in your travels?
Well, thank you, Kurt. And you're a seminarian, and that gives me an opportunity to reiterate or just emphasize I am no theologian. I'm at a very childlike faith. I'm just pretty happy and comfortable with my faith, and I love to hang out with theologians who can wow me with all these reasons why I've got a strong faith if you really wanted to dissect it. But I'm just thankful for it. And part of that, Kurt, is the answer to your question. Where do I find spirituality in my travels? And I find it in man-made places. I find it in cathedrals. I find it in a humble little cathedral in a little village where I sit in the pew and I can actually feel the wooden carved edge of the pew that's 500 years old, and I can feel the grooves made by the leashes of the shepherds that tied their dog to that pew every Sunday 300 years ago, because that's a little region where every parishioner would have had sheep because it was in the Cotswold villages of England. You feel the continuity. You look at the list of pastors in that church, and it goes back 400 years unbroken. You look at the light streaming through those windows. You look at the solitary senior citizen sitting alone and praying in the front pew on a Thursday morning. You just feel that richness. That's a humble church. And then I love going into the grandiose churches. And I think Protestants are generally a little bit, skeptical about all that gold leaf and all those pudgy-winged babies and so on. But I've learned that if I can park my Protestant sword at the door when I go to St. Peter's Basilica and go in there, not as an angry Lutheran, but as a temporary Roman Catholic, it's a glorious experience. And for me, St. Peter's Basilica, the most beautiful and breathtaking church on earth, is a mark of people's love of God and all that they want to do to glorify God. And sometimes, you might say, well, there's better ways to glorify God than to lavish all sorts of mosaics on the wall. But I'm not going to be critical about that. I'm just going to say, this is gorgeous and I can get it. So there's lots of ways that you can see how people have praised God, and I'm inspired by that. Music, Martin Luther liked to say, I think he didn't originate this, but he liked to say, when you sing, you pray double. And music in my own faith walk has been really helpful. And I love the thought that for centuries, music has helped people get closer to God. And of course, when you feel the power of nature, you feel close to God. So for me, walking on top of an Alp, for me, stepping into a humble little church, for me, lighting a candle in a Greek Orthodox church, surrounded by incense. I was filming a show about Easter, and we just, in fact, it's going to be airing on public television all over the country for Easter every year. And thank goodness that year, the Greek Easter was 1 week after the Western Christian Easter and the Greek Orthodox Easter. So we could film Easter in Rome, and we had another crew in Spain. And then the next week we were in Greece for that Easter Sunday. But the priest there asked me, do you appreciate incense? And he wanted me to understand the importance of incense in a Greek Orthodox style. And I said, no, tell me about it. And he said, it's a very important part of the recipe for the Mass. And they'll have a different incense at different places in the Mass. And this incense floats like a ethereal sea around the altar. And it contributes to the atmosphere. And I thought, wow, I've been for decades worshiping in churches, and it never occurred to me that incense could accentuate the mood and the thoughtfulness and the emotion of it. And I just love traveling and being reminded we can never run out of ways to broaden our understanding of our faith, and we can never run out of ways to get closer to God.
That's pretty powerful, Rick. You do know that everyone wants to be you. You know that, right?
Well, I'm going to be me for a little while longer, so you're just going to have to sit tight.
Yeah, just thought I'd interject that a little bit.
Well, Tammy, I'm so thankful that I've I've found a niche, and I found it early on, and it's just what I do, is I travel, I make mistakes, I laugh at myself, I learn, I get out of my comfort zone, I get ripped off and I celebrate because they don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam and bring it home, and then I get to come home and I get to share the lessons of my experience. And over time, my teaching has sort of evolved because I've been in a situation where I can kind of teach what I want, and for a decade I was just teaching the budget tricks. And then after that, I remember I thought, well, people can figure out how to catch the train and pack light and get a hotel. I'm going to talk about appreciating art and history and culture. And then after that, I realized there's something even higher on this Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs, and that's traveling in a way that is transformational. That if you're going to think of the road as church, that sharpens your faith, that gets you closer to God, that lets you come home with a better connection and empathy for the other 96% of humanity. I mean, this is a beautiful thing. So we have that opportunity in our travels, and me as a travel teacher, to stay low or slide up on that hierarchy of travelers' needs. But the pinnacle, the most beautiful thing, and I aspire to do this as a teacher, as a tour guide, as a TV producer, as a guidebook writer, and just as a friend when I'm running around Europe with the people I like to travel with, is to travel in a way that broadens our perspective. From a Christian point of view, I think there's a stewardship dimension to this. If we invest the time and the money to go over there and have a picnic in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower, I like to think that it's a good stewardship of our time and our resources, and it makes us better connected to our planet and more appreciative of our planet. And when we come home, we are more, I guess, empathy. We're in solidarity with nature, and we're in solidarity with other people that we otherwise wouldn't appreciate. And for me, that's such a beautiful souvenir.
It is beautiful, and I feel fortunate to have experienced those sort of thin spaces where the divine and
I love that concept. What do you mean when you say thin spaces?
it's as I understand it, when the divine, the presence of God, is so close to the earth where you
Yeah.
are, where you're ingrained,
Yeah.
that it's very difficult to tell the difference. Iona is one of those places that is always
Iona?
classified as a thin space.
In space, Iona's had and I just blitz in as a tour guide, but there's something about Iona that makes me want to move in. Assisi
Right.
is a thin space, and Assisi is well known for an interfaith gathering place. The teaching of St. Francis is pretty easy for people to get their brains around and embrace without getting hung up on a lot of dogma and different, denominational differences and so on. But the thin space there in Assisi brings people together. And boy, it's such a challenge for a tour guide to encourage and enable people to take a moment, be in the moment, put your camera down, hike up to that ruined castle with a sandwich and listen to the bird song and imagine 800 years ago, St. Francis. I mean, it is so beautiful and powerful.
It's extremely powerful and overwhelming at times. So for others to be able to have those experiences, makes my heart sing too. So
Mm-hmm.
so we're getting quite a few questions from our audience about pilgrimage. We're going to get to that, so hang on to that thought. But we want to go ahead and give away one of your books, Rick. And so I just want to say that these are autographed books from Rick Steves. And it's his latest book, For the Love of Europe. They're amazing. The images are vivid and colorful, and the stories, Rick, you bring to life your experiences. So we're thrilled to be able to give away 5 of those books. And the first book winner is Oakyon from California. So we're going to be getting that book out to Oakyon, and we hope that it will bring great joy in the coming days and weeks. So
Nice.
thank you. Awesome. Uh, so you've talked a little bit about travel provides a broader perspective, and I think we'll get into more of that just through conversation. Um, but this might be a good time to show the first of two of the brief video clips we want to show from your video library. These
Oh,
come from your website called Classroom Europe.
hmm.
And this clip is one in a series of videos that you produced called Why We Travel. And this clip, number 5, really sets the stage for questions about the spirituality of connections. So if we'll cue up this brief video, then after we'll have a bit of conversation, Rick.
Okay.
By traveling thoughtfully, we connect. Even for those of us who can only travel as a state of mind, travel can result in a deeper connection. Travel connects us face to face with reality. It's not virtual. It's not through a viewfinder. Travel is candid, honest, being in the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
In a world hungry for authenticity, we yearn for connection.
But now she's quite big. She's like you, about like that, yeah.
Travelers connect with different cultures, different people. On the road, strangers are just friends we've yet to meet. Travel frees us from routine. It creates room for serendipity.
Okay, so now I'm ready to be a shepherd. This is
Serendipity leads to connections. Travel forces us to bend and to flex. It makes us more tolerant and inspires us to celebrate diversity. The lessons I've gained from exploring Europe, the land of my heritage, are universal. For me, these lessons are affirmed and then stretched when traveling further afield. As a child ventures beyond his backyard, I ventured beyond Europe. Year after year, I pushed my boundaries. The world opened wide with a montage of wonders and lessons learned. Traveling beyond my comfort zone, culture shock became constructive. The growing pains of a broadening perspective, my ethnocentrism challenged. The celebration of difference and oneness at the same time. The recognition that love is love in their home just as in mine.
I think this is a beautiful, beautiful welcome here.
Through travel, we see a world filled with joy, with compassion, and with good people. We learn the more we reach out, the more we receive. We learn that we all share the same world,
Nice.
and we all share the same window of time. Travelers seek bridges rather than walls. Every wall has two sides and two narratives. For one to be truly understood, both must be heard. Traveling, we realize that challenges of our future will be blind to borders and best overcome not by conflict and walls, but by community and bridges. There's so much fear these days. The flip side of fear? It's understanding. And we gain understanding when we travel.
What is this? The celebration of Obama's.
Travel is more than a holiday. It gives us new experiences, acts as our greatest teacher, makes our lives more meaningful, and connects us with a global family. We can't all travel physically, but anyone can live with a traveler's mindset. It's a choice. Travel makes us more comfortable with the world, our hearts bigger, and our lives richer. And it makes us happier. And that is why we travel.
Yeah, awesome. I want to make a plug for your Classroom Europe, but I don't want to spend too much time on it because we have so much to cover. But if you haven't been to Rick Steves' website, do check out the Classroom Europe. These are video clips that are free and available to teachers of all areas to use. And Rick, that's a fantastic resource. So thank you for providing that.
Thank you, Tammy. And, I've got 150 TV shows, and a lot of school teachers use my shows in their classes, but a 30-minute show is kind of clunky. So I broke it down into 500 little teachable clips, like what we just saw there. It's free, there's no ads, it's fun and fast, and you just type in whatever you're looking for, and then you can cobble together a playlist designed specifically for what you're wanting to teach. And it's my gift to teachers and homeschooling parents, and I'm realizing it's a lot of fun for travelers as well. But as I was looking at that last clip, that's from a half-hour program we just produced. It's our most recent show. We produced it just on the year we couldn't travel this last year. When I looked at that in the context of our discussion, Tammy, all of those faces, all of those experiences, it's such a celebration of life. And I thought of all of the people who are so hardened and fearful and set in their ways and threatened by people who do things differently. And what a blessing it is for me, just by odd luck, to have been exposed to all of this and then prioritized to have those experiences and to be able to go and to celebrate the world and to really believe the world is filled with joy and love and beautiful people. And when we get out there, we get to know the family. You could take everything I teach, and I teach in a secular world. You could swap out a few words, and you could turn it into, spiritual kind of teaching and thinking. I wrote a book called Travel as a Political Act. Well, you could take out the word political and put in the word spiritual, travel as a spiritual act. But there, in that last 3 minutes, we certainly celebrated the diversity and the love and just the joy on this planet. And it's a celebration.
It absolutely is. And, hold that thought on that book, Travel as a Spiritual Act. So we'll put that in the hopper and work on that if you're up for it. But what you said
I'll send you this book, Tammy. I'll send you this book, and then you can do a search and replace and turn it into Travel as a Spiritual Act.
Absolutely. Shameless plug, Rick. I support it.
There you go. I got all my plugs ready here.
That's right. So, but in the clip we just watched, you said, in a world hungry for authenticity, we yearn for connection. I mean, is that a spiritual statement? And if it is, does that point to a kind of spiritual deficiency in our world? In your opinion, I mean, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I can tell you just through the lens of a tour guide. I take people around Europe. I've done that for 30 years, and they scrimp and they save to afford this trip, and they get over there, and it's such a struggle for a lot of people to be in the moment, not to look at everything through a screen as they're getting their selfies and so on, but to actually be there, to be unguarded, to be open, to be a chameleon, a cultural chameleon, where you eagerly get out of your comfort zone and you try new things. It just carbonates your whole outlook. It carbonates your appreciation. It just gives more colors to the palette that you're going to paint your life story with. And I just think it's such a beautiful blessing to be able to do that. But the sad thing is, a lot of people have the opportunity, but for some reason they don't have the I guess they don't have the tour guiding or the pastoral care or whatever, or the parenting to get out of their hotel room and get out there into the market and connect with people and put your camera down and be in the moment. And don't ask for your favorite drink, try a new drink. It's just, that's what makes good travel. And there's two kinds of travelers, those who get it and those who don't.
Absolutely. It is difficult, especially I remember the first time I went abroad, and it's new and it's not familiar. And so along with that, there is a level of fear. And
Right.
So you talked about that. Actually, you were giving a commencement speech to a group of college students several years ago, and you spoke quite candidly about how much fear there is in our society today. And you told those students that fear can stifle one's ability to be compassionate. In fact, you repeated it more than once. You said to those students, "Don't be afraid." And
Right.
you sounded a little like those angels instructing the shepherds on Christmas. Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. I've been thinking about that lately, Tammy, even a more spiritual sense. Now, first of all, I would never encourage anybody to take any risks. I don't take risks when I'm traveling, but you need to recognize that. Well, first of all, when I grew up, people said bon voyage. They didn't say have a safe trip. And statistically, it is safer to leave home than it is to stay home. If you really are going to, split hairs and wonder what is safe. So there's nothing dangerous about traveling, but I long for the days when people would say bon voyage again instead of have a safe trip. If somebody tells me I have a safe trip, I'm inclined to say, well, you have a safe stay at home, because where I'm going is safer than where you're staying. But I think one thing might be have a safe trip. We risk upsetting our norms when we travel. And maybe part of the danger of traveling is we recognize our ethnocentricity. We recognize our how we're struggling, how we're needy. And when we travel, we recognize there's more to life than increasing its speed. When we travel, we realize that suffering across the sea is just as real as suffering across the street. When we travel, we realize why Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Travel makes a person wiser, if less happy." When we travel, we realize that we've been duped. I'll never forget the first time I went down to Central America a long time ago. I went on a political trip. I went down there to learn about economic justice in Central America. And my dad, at the airport, the last thing he said was, "Son, don't be duped." Now, what did he mean? Don't be duped. He didn't want me to drink the Kool-Aid of those economic justice causes, that liberation theology action. And he didn't want me to recognize the truth down there. And he was thinking I would be duped if I did. It's scary to get out of your norm and to realize maybe we're not the center. Maybe Jesus is not a white guy who speaks English,
My Lord.
I love that. And that takes a little courage sometimes.
Don't look now, Rick, but I think you've just turned into a prophet. And you know what happens to prophets. It's never good news.
Okay.
Right? But speaking of good news, let's give another book away. So winner number 2 is James from North Carolina. You are the proud recipient of For the Love of Europe, autographed by Rick Steves, and we'll be getting that out to you very soon. And why not another question, Rick, from our audience? I'll tell you, we're getting some really good questions, and if I might say so, we slated the talk for an hour, but Rick, you're up for talking and dialoguing until we're out of questions, maybe. So not so concerned about the time.
I'm going nowhere but right here. I'm just happy as a clam to be talking to everybody. So this is great for me. I
love it. And just a note, we have over 2,300 audience members tuning in with us. So
fantastic.
Yeah. Right. So we are getting questions about pilgrimage. We're going to get to that here in just a second. But let's take a question from Carol, who asks, Rick, can you please share how your spiritual practice may include traveling to places where God's people are oppressed, seeing Jesus in the faces of the oppressed? So how do your travels relate to those kinds of situations?
Well, if you stay home, it's hard to really understand what struggles are going on south of the border. And if you travel south of the border with your window down, with your heart open, recognizing that Jesus cared about the poor and the downtrodden, he had a particular love for economic justice and so on. When you travel south of the border, you see huge faith. You see people who are poor beyond imagination, who live with a spirit of abundance. And then it becomes very striking how people who are wealthy beyond imagination live with a mindset of scarcity. It's a very jarring thing for me as a privileged white American who buys a cup of coffee every day at Starbucks that costs what the average person on this planet earns in one day's wages. I mean, half of humanity is trying to live on $5 a day. It's so honest and candid and brutal to recognize that wealthy people live with this mindset of scarcity, and people who are living day to day in a very, very simple and basic lifestyle, they're living with this celebration, a celebration of abundance. And in a lot of ways, their faith is stronger than ours. And I'm inspired by that. So when I go to poor parts of the world, I don't have pity. I have a hunger for fellowship and to share and to learn and to inspire. And I want to go home with an empathy or a solidarity for the people that I've met. And I go home also, Tammy, with an understanding that as a Christian, I think it's totally in line with my faith to exercise my faith here, my values here, in a citizenship kind of way. And that means when I step into the privacy of a voting booth, or when I'm going to vote, I know that who wins this election will probably impact people south of the border more than it will impact me. And as a Christian, I feel it is honest for me to vote for what is good for people who are struggling more than what's better for my bottom line. It almost seems like a crazy thing to do, but I just think it is so honest and so right. And when I step into the voting booth, I'm careful to vote for what is right for people who are struggling, not what's right for me. And I don't think that's heroic. I think that's just honest as a Christian. And I think that people need permission to know that it's okay to look at things in terms of economic justice. I know we're sort of wired not to read the Bible through economic justice eyes because that's hard for privileged people. But south of the border, there's a lot of there's a lot of beautiful people with strong and passionate faiths, and they read the same Bible we do, and they interpret it through developing world eyes. And I think it's instructive for us to be mindful of that and to be honest about that. And I think that's a great little extra souvenir that I can take home, is a passion for trying to understand my faith and our Bible through developing world eyes rather than through wealthy world eyes.
And you're right, Rick, that is not easy. And it takes spiritual development in terms of empathy and trying to put oneself in the shoes of someone living south of the border. And, that's a great way. Carol took us into this understanding of people who are oppressed. And oftentimes when we travel as pilgrimage, we are asking those big questions. Who am I? What is my purpose? Sort of this self-examination kind of narrative. So I think this might be a good time to jump into the idea of pilgrimage.
Yeah. Well, let me, because you've got a clip, I think, about what my ideas about pilgrimage. And when I made this Why We Travel show, Tammy, it's like a half-hour long poem. It's a love note to travel. Why we travel. It was such a beautiful experience for me to just to think right here at home as I was locked down during COVID, writing this script and then cobbling it together. And I wanted some kind of structure for the show. And I thought, well, there's why we travel. There's three reasons to travel. You can travel as a tourist just to do fun things and have experiences. Nothing wrong with that. You can travel as a traveler. This is my kind of terminology. A traveler, which is going to learn to appreciate different things culturally and historically and so on. Or you can travel as a pilgrim, and that's to learn about yourself. And in so many ways, I find I learn more about myself and my home by leaving my home and looking at my world from a distance in a different surrounding, in a different environment. So this clip is going to talk about, and it's not a right answer. You shouldn't all have to travel like a pilgrim if you're, trying to be a good person or whatever. It's just to remember that when you travel, you've got those three dimensions. You've got the crazy cruise ship stuff and the theme park stuff and the selfie photographs, and let's all go have a great time. And that's great. Summer skiing, a jazz festival. Okay, that's being a tourist. You got the traveler thing, and that's trying new stuff and gaining an appreciation of things you wouldn't otherwise know. I mean, stinky cheese. A lot of people spend a lot of money on stinky cheese because life's too short to have mediocre cheese. Well, those are travelers that have been to France. And then the third thing, of course, is that pilgrimage. And it's fascinating to think of pilgrimage travel, even if you're not the kind of person of faith who might go on a pilgrimage. This is a huge opportunity. So let's watch this little clip and think about travel, the pinnacle of why we travel, to learn about ourselves by leaving home and to get closer to God.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
On the road, like pilgrims, we can become seekers. Even in this age of unprecedented abundance, many of us hunger for something more, for meaning. By leaving home, we learn more about home, more about ourselves. We pause, reflect, and hope to grow. Throughout the ages, people have looked beyond the physical world to get close to God or some heavenly creator. To ask the eternal questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where will we go? It's always been a mystery. Fertility, abundance, the cycle of life, the promise of something after we die. We sing. We perform rituals. We celebrate. We sit with someone of a different faith and accept their love.
I love you. I love him. I love everybody.
We go to war, often mixing up love and fear. Pawns of the powerful, killing, often in the name of God. We struggle to understand. We trust, or at least hope, someone up there is listening. Whether religious or not, travelers can learn from the holy books of the great monotheistic faiths, each the story of refugees and nomads, of pilgrims and travelers. In the Torah, the people of Israel wandered in the wilderness. In the Bible, Jesus' disciples left home and set out to share their good news. In the Quran, Muhammad said, "Don't tell me how educated you are. Tell me how much you've traveled." These holy scriptures are the stories of travelers. Lessons from those for whom the road was church, synagogue, or mosque. People who traveled to find something bigger. Pilgrims trek today. Some to get close to God. Others to better understand themselves. My journals have helped me reflect on how being small is actually being big, how being alone is actually being connected. June 30, 1980, the Schilthorn. I hiked out, only a little afraid, past the top of a snowfield and onto the tip of a nearby peak, where I felt very close to God. Needing some alone time, I snuck out to a remote spot beyond the temple, and among broken Roman columns, just got windblown in lovely solitude, and then sat on a stone throne. A bit cold, loving the silence. I thought, nobody knows where I am.
Here's to good wine and good family.
Traveling makes us appreciate. Appreciate what we have rather than what we don't have. Savoring the luxury of a simple meal. Embracing solitude. Valuing each summit earned. Religious or not, we count our blessings. Blessings of plenty, of stability and community, of family bonds, and deep friendships. Why do I see humanity as one? Because I've traveled. Why am I curious? In spite of my privilege, why do I care? Because I've traveled. Why am I grateful? And why do I want to contribute? Because I've traveled. This is why we travel and why we keep traveling. Through traveling, we find meaning.
Yeah.
I want to take that tour. That looks like an amazing montage. I wish I could string all that together, all of those beautiful moments, but they're spread across Christendom and Islam.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear you talk a little bit in that clip about the Abrahamic faiths and, all the living world religions include in some form within their sacred texts or their prophets' pilgrimage, the idea of pilgrimage and self-examination and revelation. So I think that's part of travel, whether we intend to start out on a pilgrimage. I think if we're, as you say, thoughtful travelers, maybe we'll have little mini pilgrimages within the larger context of our trip.
Tammy, I think that's so important for people to recognize that's an option. It's just kind of a twofer. You can go on your vacation, and it can also be, to a certain degree, a pilgrimage. And when we think about the sacred texts of us Christians or Muslims or Jews, it's all the story of nomads, people on the road, people of the road, people in exile, people dealing with economic justice in a political sense. It's so, to me, so vivid and so exciting to splice that into the experiences you're having while you're on the road. And when you're on the road, you have these experiences you cannot have at home. I mean, I'll never forget, I was in the shadow of Mount Ararat with a Turkish family, and we got invited into the leader of the village's home, and we're all dancing, and I've got my American friends with me, and I'm sort of the tour guide, so the big shot in the town grabs the big shot among the visiting Americans, and we're all dancing, like shaking your shoulders and snapping your fingers like you do in Turkey. And I'll never forget, he brought me over to a place on his wall where he hung his Quran in a bag. And this is the most holy place for a Muslim, was the place where he hung his Quran bag. And I'll never forget, he told me, this is the most holy place in my house. And in my Quran bag, I keep a copy of the Bible, a copy of the Torah, and a copy of the Quran. Because the way I see it, we're all people of the book, children of the same God. Now, for me, that was such a beautiful moment. It's a souvenir you could not find in any shop in the world. It's connecting with people, celebrating life, getting close to God, and embracing the diversity. And you come home better connected. You come home in solidarity. You come home better understanding that beautiful notion that we're all children of the same God. I just absolutely love that.
It's very powerful. As I'm listening to you talk about your experiences, again, we're going back to connection. And that connection that you had, understanding here is someone who is sharing with you a very sacred moment and a sacred space within his daily rituals.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I think if we pay more attention to, someone once said, if we just pay attention, we will have these kinds of experiences that really transform our thinking.
Yeah. Well, why would Mohammed, as I mentioned in that last clip, say, don't tell me how educated you are, tell me how much you've traveled? You know, I mean, it's because you get out and you recognize, hey, we're all in this together. We were talking about fear, and fear is for people who don't get out very much. If the world wanted to make a very smart investment in peace and stability, I think they would create a fund and let every American enjoy a little gap year between school and work where they could get out and become global citizens. And then they'd come home more thankful than ever, probably, that they're Americans. But they would live their lives recognizing and celebrating the fact that there's 96% of humanity out there. You know, when we talk about connecting, we think about travel, and it's a geographical thing. It's physical. It's this way. But you can also connect over time. And this is the challenge. And I think, you know, I've got a history degree, and I'm certainly no historian, but I've got enough of an appreciation that I can actually put myself back in time, and then I can better appreciate people who did some very serious thinking and some beautiful things. I can better appreciate it because I can understand the context in which they did that. And I just think that really helps. It really helps when you can go back in time and appreciate things on its standards, in its world. And when then you can travel during our time and you can appreciate things on its standard, in its world. And that lets you be, I think, more connected with this whole reality that we're so blessed to call life. It's just a lot better than sitting at home watching TV, I'll tell you that. Unless you're watching a Rick Steves TV show.
Well, of course. Absolutely. And, you know, I love Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And he talks about that journey, you know, we leave home, but then that tension that when we encounter the other, as he talks about, often leads to a personal crisis. And I don't know that can be understated, that experiencing different cultures and having conversations with people who are different than us oftentimes does throw us into a kind of crisis. And we don't know what to make of how we were brought up.
It causes us to reconsider what makes us who we are. And that's the growing pains of a broader perspective. And some people would rather not deal with it. Travel makes a person wiser, if less happy. Don't tell me how educated you are. Tell me how much you've traveled. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-minded. I could give you all sorts of quotes, you know. It's just smart, thoughtful people have recognized that travel's not for wimps. You know, you're going to get out there and you're going to be dealing with some reality. I love it. But I'm lucky because on my very first trip, Tammy, when I was just a 14-year-old kid, my parents took me to see the relatives in Norway. And I was not only ethnocentric, I was egocentric. I mean, as you can imagine, a 14-year-old kid who had never been anywhere. And I was in a park. It's so interesting to think back on it. I was in a park behind the palace in Oslo. It's the Frogner Park. And it was filled with families out on a sunny afternoon. And I remember my parents were just loving me inexplicably. And I knew my mom and dad didn't have a lot of money. They had never been to Europe before. They had compromised hugely in their travels in order to take their son along and expose me to all of this. They were just loving me. I mean, just flat out crazy loving me. And I looked out in that park, and I still remember to this day, it was speckled like some sort of a idyllic Monet painting with all these other parents loving their kids as much as my parents loved me. And it occurred to me right then and there that, oh my goodness, this world, I never realized it, but this world is home to literally billions of equally precious, just as precious as little old 14-year-old Rick, equally precious children of God. And for me to be burdened with that little bit of understanding has been a wonderful blessing, because it just reminds me of the richness of this planet. And it makes it so easy to see that we're all family. And again, comes back to that very simple appreciation of our relationship with our Heavenly Father. I mean, this is our creation. We're all children of God. And when we travel, we're celebrating the family.
Absolutely. And you have an authenticity, not only because of your experiences. You have literally put yourself in these sort of case studies. You've lived it, and so you're not speaking from the point of view of a researcher, though you do research. But I think that brings to life these stories because they are yours, and they connect us, your audience, with people from around the world. So you're very believable, Rick, and I think that's important for those of us who want to offer a witness to others about our travels and how our lives have been transformed. So I think that's very important. I think it's also very important to give away another book.
Before we give that book away, Tammy, I just think a prerequisite for what you're just talking about there is traveling on purpose, traveling intentionally. When I was a kid, I had that journal that you saw in that last clip. It was a hardback journal. It's 40 years old now. And I remember I parsed out how many pages I had for a 60-day trip or whatever. And I wrote one page of where I am today in my outlook, in my faith, in my world. And then the next page was going to be where I am after this trip. And then I skipped that page and I had 60 days of traveling. And on the plane home, I would fill in that page number 2, which talks about how this trip was transformational. I've never explained this to anybody. I've never even verbalized it. But that there was the definition, I think, of intentional travel. I was traveling on purpose. I was traveling wanting to shake me up and let me come back together and fly home with this new perspective. And I'm so thankful for that. And it's something that anybody can have. And that would be the mark, I think, of a good trip. Now let's give away a book.
Yeah, you want to? This one is near and dear to my heart because Jennifer from Indiana is the winner of number 3. So who's your state? Jennifer, we will be in touch and make sure you get this book as soon as possible. So thank you for registering. We appreciate it very much. I do want to talk just a little bit, Rick, about the idea of pilgrimages, transformation, but I also want to talk just a little bit about an interfaith experience you had before we sort of move into a new area. You once told a story about leading a tour group in Turkey. And during that tour, you had an opportunity to experience, which I've never had this experience, so it was really compelling to me. But you experienced the prayer ritual of a whirling dervish. And the way you interpreted that experience was quite moving. And I'm wondering if you could recount that experience and tell us a little bit about what you learned.
Well, sure. And as a travel writer and a tour guide and a teacher and an enthusiast for respecting other cultures, I've always been a little bit annoyed when a sacred ritual of one culture becomes cruise ship entertainment for another culture. And, the average American, myself included, until I learned more about this, just thought, oh, cool, a whirling dervish. Are they getting dizzy? What's going on, But they're in a meditative trance and they're praying. They're monks that are praying. And I learned about that. And as a tour guide, I just love to take people to Turkey. It's a great opportunity to expose Christians from America generally to a moderate Western-looking Muslim country that has a passion for keeping the separation of mosque and state, just like we do the separation of church and state, and there's just a very strong Muslim faith in Turkey. So when I take people to Turkey, we get a better appreciation of Islam. And my goal as the tour guide was to help my group meet a dervish so we could watch him whirl and learn what he's doing. So I'll never forget, my group was at the hotel and I'm running around the town looking for a dervish. And I found one. And I'll just paraphrase here because it's a little bit silly, but I kind of said, hey, I'm an American tour guide and you're a dervish, right? I've got a group back at the hotel. Could we come and watch you whirl? And he said, well, I'm not a photo op. I'm the Muslim equivalent of a monk. But if I can explain to you what I'm doing and why, you're welcome to watch me pray. I said, great. When and where? So we met him on his rooftop. Sun was going down. We're gathered around, me and my dozen American travelers, and he's in his robe and everything. And it's not a tourist show. He does this 5 times a day when he prays. And he says, welcome. I am a dervish. You Christians would call that a monk. And I followed the prophet Mevlana. And he's kind of like the Muslim version of St. Francis, the prophet of love. Everybody can get their brains around that. And everybody can like Mevlana. We call him Rumi in our culture, I think. Rumi. We like his poetry. And this dervish said 5 times a day, I whirl myself into a meditative trance, and then I meditate on the teachings of Rumi or Mevlana. And he says, I plant 1 foot in my hometown, my family, and the other foot goes around and celebrates the diversity of God's great creation. And he demonstrated how by having 1 foot planted, the other foot going around, he whirls around. And he raises one hand up to accept the love of his heavenly Father, and the other hand, like the spout of a tea kettle, goes down and showers God's love on his creation, and he whirls. And then he meditates on that. He wants to become a conduit of God's love. And we watched him, and he whirled, and his head tilted over, and his robe billowed out, and he whirled, and he became that conduit of God's love, celebrating the diversity on this planet and still anchored in his own culture and his own home. And as a tour guide and a teacher, and somebody so eager to expose my travelers to something that was previously frightening, I'll never forget watching that monk and then looking over at my group and see the wonder sweep over their faces. And I thought, this is good travel. This is what a tour guide is supposed to do. My group is going to go home a little less afraid, a little more connected, and they're going to go home with that most beautiful souvenir, a broader perspective. And I'm so thankful for that dervish and for that moment. And it just contributes to my whole joy of being able to be a advocate for people who have the opportunity to travel as if the road is church.
It's extremely transformative. I know the times that I've traveled and experienced folks of different faith traditions, it has caused me to look inside myself. Why don't I pray 5 times a day? What is it about Islam that calls them to faithfully pray and take stock of my own practices and where I need to do better, quite honestly?
Now, isn't that a healthy attitude to interfaith relationships? Just to say, how can I be inspired to be a better person of faith as a Christian by my Muslim friends? I was, Tammy, we saw just a very short clip, I think, on one of those clips we rolled of just a wonderful, bubbly, loving imam in the mosque I think it's called the Mosque of Omar. That's right there on Nativity Square in Bethlehem, facing the Church of the Nativity, where we believe Jesus was born. And I learned that Mary has a chapter in the Quran named after her, and Jesus is considered a very important prophet and so on. So there's a respect for Jesus and Mary. And this monk, I sat down with him, and I was so overwhelmed by his love. It was not he didn't have a sophisticated theology that he shared with me. I mean, his English was too limited, but his love and his thrill of being able to sit with somebody from another hemisphere and from another religion, because we were both people of the book, children of the same God, as we learned earlier. And I cried. He brought me to beautiful tears. And I just thought, that is such a moment. And I just wished so many of my friends who are threatened by Islam could have sat on that carpet in Bethlehem with that imam and hugged him and cried and received his love. It's a beautiful
It's powerful. Thing. Yes.
And the typical American, Tammy, the typical American Christian tourist that goes to the Holy Land, they make a beeline from Israel into Bethlehem to see the Church of the Nativity, and then they scamper back to safety without ever connecting with a Muslim there. 100 yards away, you can go into the Mosque of Omar. They don't know who I am. I'm just another American tourist, to them. And you can get to know somebody if you want to, and you can learn a lot.
And their extension of the hand of hospitality is always present. Just standing in Maker Square.
A visitor is a gift from God. You hear that all the time. A visitor is a gift from God, and you're treated that way.
Welcome the stranger. I think Jesus may have said that. I don't know. But that's a very powerful story. We've touched a little bit on poverty, and certainly for the first time in months, we're at a year now, we are seeing some light break through the shadows of this COVID-19 pandemic. And many of us are looking forward to booking our first excursion to anywhere. But what if folks are struggling financially, especially since, many hardworking people lost their jobs during the pandemic? Yep. And college students also often just scraping by, juggling part-time jobs, going to class, barely managing to offer a modest tip to the pizza delivery driver. So for students and adults who are not able to travel abroad because finances will not accommodate a flight to Europe, how can they gain a broader perspective? Or are broader perspectives only accessible to the rich?
Absolutely not. It's easy if you can jet off somewhere comfortably and drop into this or that culture, but there's plenty of ways that we can nourish a broader perspective right here at home. And I do want to mention, when you're talking about all the hardship during this COVID time, it's awkward kind of for me. My bottom line is based on people's ability to travel. And of course, I'm having a miserable year in my business, but my dashed travel plans and my miserable business situation right now, that's not the issue. The issue is our community, and are we taking care of our neighbors? And I'm thankful I've got a perch here where I'm looking out at my community, and I know there's a lot of fear and a lot of difficult times behind these doors, beyond which, I don't think most of us could even recognize. You just know there's a lot of people struggling. And I'm hoping that during this COVID time, we're recognizing the importance of taking care of our neighbors, the importance of taking care, the fragility of our environment, the blessing of science, and the importance of good governance, and the fact that, we need to be whole at home. That's so much more important. We need to live lives where we're living sustainably. And that means travel in a sustainable way if we're going to be travelers. And that's a whole other discussion, but it's an important one. But now that we're in this pause, I think it's God's way of telling us to just slow down a minute, take a breath. And for me, it's just sort of therapy for a workaholic. And I've been implementing my traveler's mindset when I can't travel right here at home. And it's more than just culture, it's life. It's appreciating things you wouldn't normally appreciate because you can't do what you normally do. And I've been really thankful for it. I've become closer to nature. I've appreciated the moment more. I've appreciated community more. I've done just simple things that I've never had the opportunity to do before. My girlfriend's a great cook, and I've learned how to cook. She's got a couple of dogs. I never realized that dogs are they play a very important role in our society. I just never figured that out until just now. This old dog has learned a new trick, I'll tell you that. And I'm friends with the hummingbirds here. Every time the sun sets, it's a devotional. This has been my children are saying, "Who is this man?" And I do thank this pandemic for that. It got me off of my intense, focused track, and I've become a more well-rounded and I think a more appreciative person, a happier person, really. And I'm patient. Patience is not an American forte. It's certainly not a Rick Steves forte. But right now, patience is my middle name. We'll get to travel again, but we've got something more important to do, and that's to take care of our neighbors and to learn from this pause. And come out of it better. I think we're seeing that. I think people are supporting, they're recognizing the value of their churches, and we've got, I think the numbers are good that people are supporting their congregations. People are supporting causes that matter to the fabric of our communities. Public television is doing great during this COVID time, There's just lots of people that are recognizing the importance of things closer to home. And that's the foundation so that we can reach out and have that broader perspective.
I love it. So even in a quarantine situation, your perspective has been broadened, which is another testimony.
It really has, in a way that surprises me. And it's, I'm Mr. Travel in a lot of ways. I've spent my whole life traveling and teaching, and I love it. I don't regret a minute of it. But I am thankful for this pause that I've been able to realize there's so much more to life than that. And all of us, regardless of what we are most passionate about, it's fun to have the excuse to try something new. That is a traveler's mindset. See, I've developed this life skill of employing something I think I'm good at, of having what I consider a good traveler's mindset. What is that? To have an appetite for getting out of your comfort zone, for trying new things, for having a positive attitude, for making mistakes and learning from them. As you travel, I'm doing that right here at home. I'm employing that traveler's mindset here, and it works. It works in a domestic sense, just as it does in an international sense. And I'm excited about that. Now, to get back to your point, though, Tammy, about how can we open up to different cultures and the wonderful diversity on our planet, this has been an instructive year in our society as we deal with racism and the challenges we have of being a society that is fair and celebrates its diversity and instead of discriminates against different people. And it's not easy. And this is a chance for us to do that. And we can take the energy we put into flying to another culture, and we can recognize that in our midst. Maybe it's not as glamorous as going to Marrakesh or the Taj Mahal, but we've got those cultural riches and all that diversity right here. And if somebody is honest and determined and ready to get out of their comfort zone, there's a lot of travels to be had pretty darn close to home.
Absolutely. And sometimes those closer to home travels can be a little bit more intimidating than to go to Europe, for example, or Asia. So love the response, Rick. Now, Anne is asking a question about our United Methodist colleges and universities. And we're on the same wavelength here, Anne, because the question that I jotted down for you, Rick, is thinking about our colleges and universities and how hard they work to encourage their students to study abroad, which all makes sense because those of us who work in higher ed understand that really transformative power of study abroad. But even more than that, maybe now more than ever, employers are looking for graduates who have, developed those personal skills, soft skills, if you will, like social awareness and cultural competencies, adaptability, some of that emotional intelligence, just to name a few. So I want to talk further about how we can make it easier for college students to travel abroad. But first, if you were giving a lecture to a room full of college students in the 21st century, post-pandemic, and these students were making plans to study abroad this fall, wide-eyed and naive, what would you say to them, particularly about the spiritual component of travel?
Well, if you can travel abroad with your university or your college, and as it be part of your formal education, or you can travel on your downtime between classes as part of your informal education. One way or another, the real challenge is to get a lot out of it. Something that I've always recognized as a challenge is when you have families that have scrimped and saved, and students that have gotten the money together to go on a foreign travel semester or whatever. It can be hugely valuable, or it can just be a party abroad. It just can be, a field day, or it can be a life-changing experience. And that's a combination of good leadership with the chaperones and the teachers and so on, as well as integrity on the part of the students to make sure to get the most out of this. It's a shame to get home from your trip and realize, oh, I could have had a more enriching experience had I gone on this foreign study program with a more constructive attitude. I know that my daughter had a chance to go to Morocco when she was in high school, and she just got to live in a village in Morocco. And it was the most beautiful experience. It was out of her comfort zone, that's for sure, but it stayed with her for the rest of her life. My son, I think my son was quite uncomfortable with a lot of people from faraway lands. And he went on a foreign study program in Rome, and that was a sort of a tipping point in his life. And then he became so comfortable with travel that now he lives in Colombia, in South America, and the world is his playground. Why? Because he had the opportunity to travel abroad. This world is a global world, whether we like it or not. And there are some people that think the way we're going to get by is to build walls to keep everybody away. But no, we need to be in a mindset where we see it's more practical to build bridges and less valuable to build walls. And if all of us traveled and we came home, I think we'd have an easier time playing ball with the family of nations. And we're going to have to do that if we're going to succeed. And that's going to be more clear than ever as we deal with crises like we're dealing with right now that are blind to borders and that can only be dealt with when nations work together. So, foreign study contributes to all of that. I think it's a struggle for us in an age when we are defunding the liberal arts in general to remind ourselves that travel is part of a complete education. In Europe, there's a very well-funded program. Even in difficult economic times, they don't take away the funds for this program. It's called the Erasmus program, and it pays for teachers and students to study and work in other countries in the European Union. And it's because Europe wants to work together and understand each other's tempo and each other's style and each other's outlooks. And it's just a recipe for success with nations working with each other. When we were filming in Portugal, we went to the university in Coimbra, which is sort of the Oxford of Portugal. And I brought a six-pack, and we were going to be part of the party one night. And I thought I was going to hang out with a bunch of Portuguese students. And it was a United Nations of students, plenty of Portuguese, but people from all over Europe and visiting from outside of Europe, thanks to that Erasmus program. And it was an inspirational evening to see all of these students living together. A lot of parents kind of go, well, are you really going to learn a lot? It seems like the classroom activities are kind of a sham. You learn so much when you are living and studying and partying abroad. It's just a beautiful opportunity.
It absolutely is. And that's especially near and dear to the hearts of United Methodists because we are a global church. And we have to consider context and other narratives that aren't ours. And it's more work. It's not as easy, but it's valuable in terms of how to understand ministry in the context of a global church.
You know, it's interesting when you say it's more work and it's not as easy. At first, it's more work, and at first, it's not as easy. But once you do it, I think you become a little more dexterous about that sort of thing. And that's kind of the value of foreign study, anyways, is to realize, yeah, we're dealing. It's an economic thing beyond just a social thing and a societal, a cultural thing, that we need to develop those skills of working with people who have a different life story, a different culture, a different tempo, different religions, and so on.
Yeah, it's for sure this mindset you speak of. And, once you get that into your heart and soul, your work becomes richer. So we're fortunate. Can we give away another book?
Let's do that. But you just said your life becomes richer. It just hit me how much richer somebody is who has this blessing of celebrating the world in all its diversity. Because right now in our great nation, we do have this challenge. There's more fear than ever. And what is the fear? The fear is the rest of the world. It's going to get us. And we've got to build our defenses up. And, we need to get out there and get to know the rest of the world. And it's a celebration. That's why I enjoy my work so much, is because once people get it, they're just thankful. They're forever thankful for having had that experience. And I get to be their coach and their cheerleader. And I just love it. And then if the road is church, it makes it even more worthwhile. Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah,
but this is a fun discussion. Let's give away a book.
I love the snap. So, right, we're going to give this book to Fembai from Zimbabwe, Africa. So this is going around the world. And Fembai, we're going to make this available to you as soon as possible. It will be coming your way. And this, too, is one of Rick's autographed books. So congratulations on
And I would imagine that's the first time in Zimbabwe that this book has ever showed up. So I am just tickled. That is really fun.
See, you experienced it here, Rick. I mean, this is only the beginning.
All right.
So let me just say, we've watched you on television. We've experienced your website. We've watched you share baklava and falafel, prosciutto and hard cheese, schnitzel and sauerkraut in the homes of European locals. I mean, are those meals planned, staged? Are they impromptu? Did someone think you looked hungry and invite you in for a venison paella? Do you ask for volunteers to feed you? Seriously, what does it mean to you, a practicing Lutheran, to sit down with someone from Turkey, for example, who doesn't practice your religious tradition, and share stuffed peppers and bread at a common table? What does that mean to you?
We probably underestimate the importance of breaking bread together. I mean, I don't know all these linguistic things, but companion, right? It's with bread. We break bread together. And when you look at a society that is struggling with sectarian problems, I think a lot of times they don't have the opportunity to break bread together. When I go to the Holy Land, the tragedy of the wall in the Holy Land, and Israel had to build that wall in order to feel safe from incursions by terrorists from Palestine. Okay, well, they had to build that wall. But you need to understand both narratives on both sides of that wall, and unintended consequences, I think, and a very serious consequences of a wall like that is people on either side of that wall are saddled with their parents' baggage, and they never have the opportunity to break bread together. The younger generation on one side of the wall and the other side of the wall, wherever that wall may be, they cannot break bread together. And that means progress towards living together, and peace is at a huge disadvantage. So many times when you get that real magic of an evening, you realize it's because you've shared a meal together. And one thing that's really poignant to me as an American, we are often eating on the way to someplace. And a common complaint I hear in Europe with travelers is, oh, I couldn't get the bill. Well, in Europe, they're not eating on the way to someplace. They're not trying to turn the table. Slow service is good service. That's the event of the evening. It is the platform upon which people commune. They share this meal. They share it. And the meal carries on. After the dinner is over, it moves into the next stage. And an hour and a half later, it looks like it's a chemistry lab. There's so many little beakers and everything for all the things they've been drinking. And then before you know it, the chef is sitting down with you, and he's done working, and he lights up a cigarette and pours you another drink. And you realize we are having an experience here that we just would never have at home. And it's one of the richest memories of our travels. I just think, how do you put a price on that? And as you said, Tammy, it's breaking bread together. Take time to break bread. My European friends cannot believe that when we're on a roll, when we're filming, we'll jump into a taxi and have lunch, a sandwich in the taxi as we're going to the next shooting spot. It's just sacrilege, and especially in France, because, lunch is sacred. You don't have a fast lunch. You sit there for an hour and you connect with your friends. There's so many delightful avenues of rich culture that revolve around the food. And food is a big part of travel, and it's a big part of connecting with people. And we've been talking about how important it is to connect.
Yeah, it really does become a kind of sacramental moment when you are having a meal, regardless of what's on the menu. So,
and you don't need to be rich. You don't need to be rich to have that. There's people sitting on a park bench having an ad lib potluck, and all they got money for is a loaf of bread and a bottle of cheap wine. And there's a communion going on there, and they're looking at the cathedral. I've been there. I've been there on that bench, looking at that cathedral as backpackers and ragamuffins have for 800 years, sitting right there, enjoying the moonlight shining on that Gothic facade, munching on a baguette with a stranger who's now your friend. It's a beautiful moment. You got to let yourself have that moment. If you don't let yourself have that moment, you're back in the hotel, watching Netflix on the wall. You could be out there celebrating.
Absolutely. All right. So how about one more question, Rick, and then we're going to give away one more book. We're going to try to wind this down, but there's so many unanswered questions that we might need to do a part 2. But for now, here's the question, and this comes from me. So I've always been curious, why is Steve's in Rick Steve's Europe possessive? What is distinctive about your Europe, Rick?
I don't know.
Is that pretentious or what?
No, it's a big deal with my staff. Is they're always wondering, is there an apostrophe here or not? On all of the books, and I honestly don't know what the rule is, but that's a marketing choice from my publisher if it's possessive. So Rick Steve's Europe. Yeah, it's my Europe. It's my experience. Sure. It's anybody's experience.
Yeah, eventually we'll want to know a little bit more about that.
But I do want to remind people, Tammy, that I do Europe because that's my beat. My favorite countries are beyond Europe. I think we touched on that. India, Southeast Asia, Japan, Central America. But from a business point of view, I focus on Europe because that's the wading pool for world exploration. And it's also a great market. I mean, if you write a book to Paris, you're going to sell a lot of books. If you write a book to Medellin, Colombia, where my son lives, you're not going to sell a lot of books. So, but I'm just trying to, our sort of mission, we like to joke, is to inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando and, go to Disney World for 3 or 4 times. But that's not real travel. It's La La Land. It's a huge market. There's one book in the United States that outsells, among travel books, that outsells my Italy guidebook. The Rick Steves Italy guidebook is beaten by the guidebook to Disney World in Orlando. Okay, that's a hard, that's a huge market. The point is, Americans really love that escape travel, that La La Land travel. And, it's okay, but there's an alternative. It's called reality travel. You can go to Mazatlan or you can go to Managua. And I'll tell you, you're going to learn more if you go to the reality destinations. And that's just my mission, is to help Americans enjoy the La La Land, but to inject that reality so we can go home with that beautiful blessing of having had a transformational experience.
Yeah, Mickey doesn't always do that. We love Mickey, but there's a little bit more to it. Yeah.
After 3 or 4 trips to Disney World, when you've memorized the map of the park, go to Portugal. Just see what happens.
Absolutely. So, are you up for a lightning round, and then we'll give away our last book?
Let's do it.
All right, lightning round, and if you need to add interpretation, feel free. But let's see how quickly we can run through this.
So what we're gonna a lightning round, meaning you're gonna ask a lot of questions, and I'm gonna try not to be so wordy.
I'm gonna give you one or the other, and you're gonna tell me your preference.
Oh.
Doesn't mean that you dislike the other, but it's simply your preference.
Great. This will be fun.
Okay, here we go. Checked bag or carry-on?
Oh, carry-on. I've never checked a bag. 9 by 22 by 14 inches. That's my self-imposed limit.
That was a softball, Rick.
Okay.
All right. Paper map or map app?
Oh, I love a paper map. I just love a paper map, but I'm starting to lose that battle, and now I'm finding that does make sense to have your pinchable map on your iPhone. So, but I miss the paper map. What I don't like is those kind of Google Map instructions where you just do one little thing at a time, and it's like you're in a maze, and I go here and then I turn left. I want to see the big picture on a conventional map, and then I can get there without glancing at it again. So I'm adjusting.
Okay, good, Rick. All right, pasty in Penzance or baguette in Paris?
Pasty in Penzance. Well, that's for a coal miner who's really hungry and he's got dirty hands, so he's just grabbing it like this, and it's just like eating a steak and kidney pie on the go. I would eat that once, but I'll have a baguette in Paris, I think. Thank you.
Fair enough. This is another softball. Disney or Dresden?
Disney or Dresden? Why am I pausing? Dresden. Dresden is the home of the Wettin dynasty. For centuries, they ran this little country, Saxony, and back before Germany was united, and they had this appetite for luxury like you can't believe. And if you go to the treasury there, you'll see some of the most exquisite jewels and artifacts that you can imagine in Dresden. Dresden's an amazing place. And plus, you can learn a lot about Dresden because they had a horrific firebomb there when they were just pulverized in World War II and lost a lot of people and have rebuilt since then.
Absolutely.
I'm such a down. I could have gone to Disneyland and just going to all the rides, but I find that a place like Dresden is so inspirational in so many ways.
It's rich. All right.
Yep.
Loafers or flip-flops?
I'm not good with flip-flops. Flip-flops give me a tension headache. I'll take loafers.
All right. Cathedrals.
I've got very tender feet. They barely see the sun. What was the next one?
All right. Cathedrals, Durham or Wells?
Wow. Well, Wells is cool because it has that hourglass figure. They built it, 700 years ago, and they didn't have a soils engineer, and something was settling and it was coming in, so they had to reinforce it by putting this beautiful, elegant scissors thing dominating the middle of the church, the scissor arch, and you kind of go, was that intentional? Because it just seems so cool. And then Wells also has this wonderful facade, and I had the rector or some leader in the church there, he explained to me how it was a glorious welcome. All the statues were painted colorful colors, and when you walked to church, the whole facade of the church was just singing to you to the glory of God and welcoming you. And that really had an impact on me. It was great. But I'm a sucker for a great Romanesque church, and that would be Durham. There's nothing like Durham. It's a fortress of God on a hill, and you go there and you just go, wow, they built this to the glory of God 800 years ago. Norman.
Thick and magnificent, yeah.
Norman. It's Romanesque would be the European term, and it was brought over by the Normans in 1066. So all of the Romanesque building in England after the Normans came was called Norman instead of Romanesque. And I think Durham is probably your textbook example of a Norman cathedral.
All right. Breakfast or lunch?
Breakfast. I just love breakfast. And then a lot of times I'll just snatch a sandwich and apple from the breakfast and have it on the run for lunch. When I'm working, I have a quick lunch because I want to get the work done. I'm on a roll, and then I'll relax more likely after dark when I'm going to have dinner. Awesome.
Window or aisle?
I used to go window, but then I realized I'm freezing when I'm sleeping on the plane going over the Atlantic, and I take the aisle now. It's warmer, and I just have a little more control when I'm on the aisle. So aisle.
We like control.
Yes,
all right.
We do.
Chopsticks or your fingers?
When I'm in India, my fingers. I love to go to a vegetarian restaurant in India that has no spoons and forks, where everybody's eating with their fingers. And it's a reminder that God intended us to use these fingers to nourish ourselves. And if you do that in tune with the culture, it just feels right. And I learned that when I was there. An anecdote I always like to use is I was at a cafeteria in Kabul in Afghanistan when I was a backpacker. And I was just minding my own business, and a man sat down next to me and he said, "I'm a professor in Afghanistan." And he said, "Are you an American?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well," he said, "I want you to know that a third of the people on this planet eat with spoon and fork like you do. A third of the people eat with chopsticks. And a third of the people eat with their fingers like I do. And we're all civilized just the same." And I thought, well, you got a chip on your shoulder. But I thought about it, and he was right. I thought less of him because he ate with his fingers. That was a very judgmental, ethnocentric thing for this Westerner who uses metal utensils to nourish himself with. And I think chopsticks are very elegant. I love chopsticks, and I'm thankful that I'm not dexterous in a lot of ways, but with chopsticks, I'm pretty darn good.
Rent a car or take a train?
Take a train. I relax on the trains. I love taking the trains, especially going from big city to big city. It's always a happy day for me when I turn the car in.
Right. All right.
Yeah.
Jet lag. Take a nap or push through?
Oh, push through. You take a nap, you're just asking for more jet lag. So you got to push through. Jet lag hates bright light, fresh air, and exercise. Okay. So what you got to do? You gotta that first day in Europe, turn your watch to European time, turn your brain to your whole outlook to European time, and you're gonna be like spacey and tired, but you gotta get out, you gotta exercise, get fresh air, do something that way, and then make yourself stay up to a reasonable bedtime, and then you will kick yourself, you'll force yourself into a European frame, and you'll avoid several days of jet lag that way. I have to work on my first day in Europe, so I have to get it right.
Sure. All right, still or sparkling?
Sparkling.
Perfect. Last one. Black pudding or haggis?
Death. No, I don't. No, let me give you an honest answer to that one. Blood pudding, it just grosses me out. I got to be honest. I haven't given it a fair chance. Haggis, it's just as gross, but I kind of like the haggis story. It's just all the little unmentionables that they didn't want to eat or whatever, put into a big intestinal sack and spiced and then cooked or something. And I find good haggis is actually quite tasty, but it's too rich for me to eat a whole plate of it. So I'll have a little side of haggis. Good haggis. And Scottish people like good haggis. Lousy gut bomb diner haggis, no way. I'd rather go hungry.
Yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. So let's give away our last book. And it looks like it's going to John from Colorado. John, you're getting For the Love of Europe, an autographed copy. Rick Steves. So we'll be sending this out to you very shortly. All right, Rick, you have been extremely generous with us this evening. It's been a delight. Please accept our heartfelt thanks for a really inspiring conversation about travel as a spiritual act. And I, for one, hope that we can continue this kind of dialogue and think a bit further with you about innovative ideas, and especially related to study abroad and curriculum, and how we might work to get college students out there for broader perspectives.
Great. Well, Tammy, it's been a delight. We clearly have the same mission, and I was just thrilled to be able to join you. We've got a wonderful, curious audience, and I hope that people have enjoyed it. And I'll just thank you and wish all of you happy travels, even if we're just staying home for a little while. But we're going to get out there and embrace the world in all its diversity and celebrate how richly blessed we are to have this world to take care of and get to know.
Amen. And thanks to everyone who registered and joined us this evening, and for hanging in there with us. If you're interested in convening a small group to think more deeply about travel as a spiritual act, we are developing a 4-week study guide, Travel as a Spiritual Act for Small Groups. And we will post information about this study guide on our social media channels very soon as it develops. And you also should know that Rick has graciously agreed to collaborate with us, GBHEM, on the study guide. So this really fun, interactive, small group adventure, if you will include compelling resources from Rick Steves' Europe. If you know someone who missed the conversation tonight, the full recording will be posted on the GBHEM YouTube channel. And as always, feel free to share. We extend traveling mercies on all of you, and may God go with you. Thanks, Rick.
Ciao.
Cheers.
Cheers.